It's good to see you, Tor.
You look tired.
Not at all. He's painting, but you should go straight in.
But you really mustn't overdo it, Violet. Just because he's got the strength of an
It's nonsense. Someone has to take dictation. The occasional late night is unavoidable.
So long as it's only occasional. He's in the drawing room, is he?
Yes.
Thank you. How is he?
You've not come here solely to inquire about my wife and family, I hope.
No, sir. I have some new information.
Good. You must forgive me, my dear fellow. There are so many things, so much work to be done, sometimes I'm overwhelmed by it. And Clemmy's being away doesn't help, of course it doesn't. Sometimes I feel there is darkness everywhere. Everything is very black.
You mustn't feel like that, sir. You're making progress, immense progress. People everywhere are beginning to see.
Are they? Do they also see that I have to live, that my children have to be fed, that I have vast expenses which can only be satisfied if I work without respite? Well, I mean, the Marlborough book alone. It's a crusher. You have the latest figures on our bomber squadrons.
There's a memorandum somewhere. Here.
Let me see it. How in heaven's name can they say we have an adequate deterrent?
24 of the proposed squadrons won't even be ready on time, sir.
Our masters are sleepwalking, Anderson.
I'm afraid that much of what Winston says about the state of the Air Force is correct. Unfortunately, his sources of information seem to be impeccable.
I hope that doesn't mean you're coming out on his side, Swinton.
Oh, of course not, but I have made some new proposals for air defense, which I think answer his criticisms. The Cabinet Secretary already has a copy.
I have it here, Prime Minister. Oh, thank you, Morrison. More proposals? You're an industrious fellow, isn't he, Nubble?
We can't ignore the fact that Hitler's spending $1,000 million a year on defense while we are proposing to spend barely a third of that. We must adopt this new scheme simply in order to survive. Of course, if we tried for even greater parity with Germany, we'd be that much safer from attack, clearly. But as you will see, I've kept the additional expenditure to a bare minimum.
How much?
425 million. But considering what we will produce by the end of 1939...
Is it really necessary to stick rigidly to a date in 1939 for completion of our program? And where do you suggest we find your 425 million pounds?
Yes, Neville's right. The Air Ministry can't bag the whole of the defense budget, you know, Swinton.
But it's the minimum that we need, Prime Minister.
Well, I'm sorry. You'll have to go away and find another scheme. I mean, we all want to maintain a bold defense program, but on the other hand, we don't want to appear to be embarking upon an arms race. I don't want MPs going around upsetting the Germans while I'm trying to get on terms with them. The situation's delicate enough as it is. We really mustn't be led astray by Winston and his warmongering.
Oh, precisely. Our priority must be to maintain peace. Apart from which, Swinton, you seem to forget we've decided not to adopt a defense program that would damage normal industrial production.
I really must protest, Prime Minister. Surely the best way to guarantee peace would be to make Britain as powerful as possible.
Exactly.
And the best way to do that is to take a long and hard look at our relationship with France. As Foreign Secretary, I feel obliged to say that a strong alliance with our neighboring country would only...
Really, Anthony, you sound more and more like Winston.
Just because one disagrees with a lot of what he says, there's no reason to disregard it all.
Oh, gentlemen, please. Do you know one thing I'm particularly looking forward to when I go? Not having to hear Winston, Winston all the time. A blissful thought. Did you know I was born in the year Karl Marx published Das Kapital? So I find myself thinking of such things more and more. Wandering back and pondering where I was right and where I went wrong. So am I boring you?
No.
Well, I shan't do that much longer. It's occurred to me quite a lot lately that I've stayed in office too long. I dare say you'll agree with that.
Do you ask me as a friend or as a politician?
No, I mean it, Winston. I want to bury myself in the country. Forget all these meetings and interminable reports. I just want to be alone with my books, just for a last few years. I told the cabinet this morning that I shall resign next month.
You will be missed by Parliament and nation.
I hope I can leave a strong and united party to my successor. You understand there must be Neville Chamberlain.
Of course.
Eddie Darby will propose him. But may I ask you, would you second the nomination?
Winston, he tricked you. You let him trick you. Why didn't you refuse?
Because I am the senior Privy Councillor and it was my duty to agree. Besides, Neville Chamberlain is a distinguished House of Commons man, and
humbug, Winston. You know very well the old fox only asked you so that you couldn't be nominated as well. How can you be so damn charitable to Neville when you know very well he's not going to ask you to serve in his cabinet? Aren't you disappointed?
A little. But I've no wish to join this government unless they have some real task for me.
Don't you want the leadership anymore?
I fear it's too late, Brendan. I've had my chance. My first duty now is to set my own affairs to rights. I must get to work on my book, my history of the English-speaking peoples. I need the money.
But people still listen to you, Winston. Your articles in the Evening Standard are read throughout Europe. You've still got a voice. You must use it, especially now that Neville's at the helm. This government's as dead as mutton.
There are some pretty good duds in the big positions, that's true. I shall do what I can. But how can I speak openly about the weakness of our government, the desperate inadequacy of our Air Force? That would be merely broadcasting to the enemy our total and dismal unreadiness.
For heaven's sake! No, I want a fully equipped Wellesley and a Blenheim. No, I've got enough for the fly past and just need a couple more for the ground inspection. What? No, God, no, they don't have to be able to fly. Well, because they'll be stuck on the bloody ground all afternoon. Think him on a who? Oh, thanks, Freddie, I really am most awfully great. What? You've got a Whitley? Well, why didn't you say so? No, we don't particularly object if they can fly, so much the better. Well done. Soon as you can, old man. It's just got to look as if it works. Come in. Well done. Now, hang on. We're still half a dozen harrows short for the fly past. Yes, well, I've tried Bingen Hill and Watersham and... Oh, well. Thanks, anyway. Tor. Glad you could make it, old man. How goes it?
Fine. And you?
Bloody awful, as a matter of fact. Sit down. It's your poison.
Nothing, thanks. I haven't got much time. What's bloody awful?
Oh, just about everything. The number of pilots killed in training has risen dramatically in the last few months. Out of our paltry 124 squadrons, I reckon at least 100 are now equipped with obsolete aircraft. And now we have to have this bloody fly-past inspection. Really, it's the limit.
What was it for?
Bunch of bloody Germans. Bloody Nazi air staff.
General Milch. He's the German Air Minister.
Yes, I know.
What do you mean? We're actually giving the German top brass the chance to see our incompetence at first hand.
Yes. The whole thing would be farcical if it wasn't so bloody tragic, wouldn't it? You better keep that copy. You will make sure that it gets through to the right quarters, won't you?
I'm simply trying to get at the facts, Morris. We've invited the German Air Minister here. Why? I've no idea. But now there's a ridiculous rush to put on a sham show.
What?
A sham show, damn it. Surely at the present time, the very
Where on earth did you
last
get all this information? If it's true, and I obviously can't confirm it, then it will be classified as top secret.
You know it's true, Morris. Apparently we're going to show the Germans our power-driven gun turrets, which are barely operational, to say nothing of the guns
The
which
men
are
who are giving
designed.
you all these details are acting in strict contravention of the Official Secrets Act. Once their names are known, they will be subject to disciplinary action.
Oh, don't be such a pompous arse, Morris. The issues are far too grave. My only concern is...
Your only concern is... You do realize, Winston, that this backstairs information that you take such delight in collecting is doing you nothing but harm.
I did not come here to receive a lecture, Morris. I've always acted in the public interest.
Public interest? You're a scaremonger, Winston, and the public will have none of it. Now, I must insist that you tell me the names of the... Good morning, Lord Halifax.
Good morning to you.
Who are these men?
Good morning, Edward. Can I help you with your coat?
Very kind of you, Winston. There's really no need. I'm quite used to it. Very kind of you.
How are you keeping, Edward?
As a matter of fact, Winston, I'm most uneasy.
Well, why's that?
General Goering's asked me to go on a hunting trip with him in East Prussia. I suppose I'll have to go.
Shall you meet Hitler?
I expect so, yes. Frankly, the whole idea appalls me.
So, you and General Goering will be pursuing inoffensive animals through the forests of East Prussia. Do you hear that, Morris? At last, the government's doing something to keep the Nazis at bay. I strongly recommend you use their guns, Edward, not ours.
And as you can see, by December 1939, Germany will have an air strength of more than 3,000. Wow.
Sorry, Prime Minister. I'll come back later if I may.
No, come in, Halifax. We shan't be a moment. You were saying?
I was trying to point out, Prime Minister, that our air strength is dangerously low compared with Germany.
Yes, you've made your opinion very clear, Philip.
It's more than an opinion, Prime Minister. It's a careful assessment based on fact.
Very well. Go on.
The Bomber Command, for instance, is wholly unprepared for war. The Air Ministry have prepared a new scheme, which I strongly urge you to accept, Prime Minister. It still leaves us 900 aircraft fewer than Germany.
Can't you see, Swinton, all this would involve the waste of vast sums of money that the country simply cannot afford. All of it to prevent a war that I'm convinced will never happen.
Prime Minister, the urgency of the situation seems to dictate.
I'm sorry, I cannot agree with you. Come back with something more realistic. I'll be pleased to consider it.
Thank you.
Good day to you, Philip.
Off this evening, are you, Edward?
Yes, yes. You don't think perhaps Eden should go in my place? After all, he is Foreign Secretary. It does seem only right and proper.
Oh, certainly not. Oh, you'll enjoy it. Oh, it's a very bad idea. Anthony's most antagonistic toward Hitler. You'll be suggesting we send Winston next.
Yes, of course. It was just a thought.
You actually discussed disarmament with Hitler?
Preliminary discussions, that's all. Entirely at his suggestion.
Well, I cannot condone this.
I have to say he was most sympathetic.
Prime Minister, this is intolerable. I will not have other members of the cabinet discussing disarmament as if it were agreed foreign policy. It isn't. While I have any say in the matter, it never will be.
Oh, come now, Anthony. Nobody's said it is our policy.
Of course not. I was merely explaining how cooperative the Nazis were.
You've done well, Edward. A cooperation, not confrontation. That's what we're aiming for.
Prime Minister, I must beg to differ. Lord Halifax has not done well. He has clearly given Hitler the impression that we're all for disarmament.
Then he thinks much as I do, Anthony.
But the German army is being trained for attack, not defense. Indeed, they are ready to move against Austria at any moment. We have new evidence that shows
We
this.
have no evidence. Now, Anthony, I will not let you dragoon me. Edward's impressions of Hitler merely confirm my own. I shall therefore be recommending a substantial overall reduction in the defense budget.
But, Prime Minister, it's already cut to the bone.
Aren't you ignoring the fact that Hitler has given his word?
His word. Pah! Of a man whose ambitions include not only world domination, but also the elimination of an entire race.
I think Hitler's domestic policy is his own business, not ours.
And Austria? Is that his business too? He certainly seems to think it is.
We can't encourage every small country to believe we're going to come charging to their rescue every time they have a problem. We really can't afford it.
And what about our pledge? To maintain equality in the air with Germany?
No pledge lasts forever. Besides, it's no longer necessary. We shall be working with Hitler, not against him. We shall sit down at a table with the Germans and run through their claims with a pencil. That's how we shall settle our differences. Of course, the Germans feel hostile towards us. We treated them badly after the war, but we can make amends. Return their colonies to them. Angola, for example.
But Angola belongs to Portugal. We have no right to snatch another country's colonies.
We have every right, because Germany will become the dominant economic force in Europe. It's her natural role, and we shall keep the empire. We can share Africa between us. We're going to create a new, exciting world.
One I shall have no part of. I find your whole policy of appeasement, as it is now constituted, completely unacceptable. How can we deal with honor with men like Hitler and Mussolini? Men who have shown again and again that they are entirely untrustworthy, concerned only for the ruthless extermination of all opposition. They don't care about us or anyone else. And all you'll achieve by these endless, undignified compromises and concessions is to bring this country to her knees, where she'll be forced to yield to the slightest pressure from these tin-pot tyrants.
Oh, come now, Anthony. Why don't you go home? And take an aspirin.
Why did Anthony resign? Why did he let them drive him out?
Did he have any choice?
He was the last one left, the last man capable of standing firm against this long, dismal tide of surrender. But you know who they've appointed in his place? Halifax! That buffoon Edward Halifax.
You must rest, you know.
How can I sleep when all I see is the destruction of our great race? I watched the morning light creep in through the window, and with it I saw a vision of death.
Come in. Prime Minister, this is an unexpected pleasure.
Evening, Horace. No. Do sit down. Horace, I have a proposal to make. I wish you to become my personal advisor at number 10. Well, how do you feel about it?
I'm flattered, sir. Very flattered. But it would hardly be proper for a mere civil servant.
You are hardly a mere civil servant, Horace. You're the government's chief industrial advisor. Your views and mine coincide entirely.
That is so, but nevertheless, I feel I might not be able to accept without certain...
Now, Horace, just let me say something. I want to make this country great once more. Oh, not by military conquest, that's all behind us now, but by looking after all our people. Their schools, their housing, their welfare, their happiness. We have a great opportunity before us. But there's all this talk of war.
Nobody really wants that.
I hope not. Must never be allowed to happen again.
I'm sure that everyone agrees with you, sir.
Do they? They should, shouldn't they? And yet there are times when I feel that the dream of bringing a peaceful and enlightened prosperity to this nation is turning into a nightmare of guns and war that will lead to the destruction of all mankind. That's why you must help me, Horace.
But I'm not a foreign affairs man.
But you can talk to people, Horace. That's your great skill. I refuse to believe that one cannot get round a table with Herr Hitler and Signor Mussolini and talk to them in reasonable terms. But look what you did for us in the general strike. Why should this be any different? We're all of us basically decent men trying to do what we can for our people. Will you help?
Well, you know that I already support you, informally.
This is no time for half-hearted support. You know I can't leave the conduct of foreign affairs to the Foreign Office alone.
No, you're all poets and intellectuals.
Quite so. Now do you see why I need you? We can create a lasting peace in Europe.
You say that this post would be official.
Oh, yes. Yes, we can get you out of this dingy old office into Downing Street. You can have an office of your own and accommodation.
Well, that would be very pleasant, but I'm not at all sure that it's entirely correct in my grade to be seen as such a close associate of the Prime Minister's.
Your grade? Oh, I shall make you permanent secretary here at the Treasury. And head of the Civil Service. Permanent head of the Civil Service.
It will be an honor to work with you, Prime Minister. I'm sure that we can find some common ground with these dictators. They're just like any other man who's been thrown up by difficult circumstances. I've seen countless union strike leaders, and it's always the same. All they ever do want is justice and fair play.
Do you think you can talk to Hitler?
Why not?
We may need to make concessions.
Oh, I expect so, but then the fewer enemies one has, the less need there is for defense expenditure. Funds can go on more creative endeavors. That is the virtue of appeasement. Have you considered giving Hitler some colonies in Africa? Tanganyika, perhaps?
That is ours, Horace.
Then let him have some of Portugal's or Belgium's. Germany has a far greater right to empire than they have.
It'll be good to hear your views on all these matters. It'll make a change from some of my colleagues in the cabinet. Is the champagne good?
Oh, I hardly think we should ask Herr Ribbentrop that, Prime Minister. After all, he did bring it.
A small farewell present.
Very generous, if I might say so.
I presume the pressure of diplomatic work leaves you very little time for the wine trade now.
No, indeed, I've not been involved in the wine trade now for some 5 years. It's quite out of the question.
Oh, of course. Winston, do join us.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I hope you've enjoyed your time here in England, Ambassador.
Delightful, Mr. Churchill. I have so many good friends here.
So I see.
We are all working together against the common enemy.
Yes, we are all united against the communists. Are we not, Mr. Churchill?
Though I have no more love for communism than have you have on Ribbentrop. Indeed, I have no love for any system which seeks to oppress and subjugate those less powerful than itself.
Sure, none of us want
What
that.
exactly did you have in mind, Mr. Churchill?
Sam, Horace, come and join us.
Good afternoon, Sam. Do you have any more news about the situation in Austria?
No. You've heard nothing more, Winston?
You should know, Mr. Churchill, there have been torchlight processions in the streets of Vienna in support of the Nazi Party. The streets echo with Nazi slogans. We are now the majority party in the country.
Indeed, Herr von Ribbentrop. Would you allow me to offer you a word of advice? Never underestimate the minorities. That is
I must say it was splendid weather when I was in Germany.
Yes, I am. Actually, it isn't too bad.
I don't believe you. Just to the neck. What he got? Something interesting, Horace. In that telegram.
Telegram?
I don't want to trouble you, Prime Minister.
Please, you have important business.
Well? It seems there are heavy German troop movements near the Austrian border.
Nothing serious, I assure you. Probably spring training.
Ah. You know, I never did trust these terse little telegrams. They can be so misleading, don't you think?
Ignoring the situation any longer. It's an open act of defiance, Prime Minister. We must put our defense plans into operation at once. If he's not stopped soon, Hitler will ride roughshod over the whole of Europe.
I think perhaps we should do something, Neville, if only to ensure that nothing similar is allowed to happen again.
I don't know.
But hundreds of innocent Austrians are being shot or put into concentration camps. Whole families of Jews are committing suicide rather than face Nazi rule. At least we could stop the same thing happening in Czechoslovakia.
Czechoslovakia is an unstable unit in Central Europe.
If the situation there were to get out of hand, the only people to benefit would be the communists. Surely it would do no harm to offer them some guarantees. The French would approve of that.
If the French want to burn their fingers there, that's entirely a matter for the French. I sometimes think none of you realize the danger we're facing. Haven't we seen enough of war? The sons of 1 million families wasted in the trenches. Do we really want that again? By pursuing a policy of positive appeasement, I'm trying to build our trade, our industry. We can achieve so much if only we don't waste our money on arms that will only lead to our own destruction. The destruction of the world. So what's the point of that?
But with respect, Prime Minister, unless we increase our armed forces, we might well be destroyed anyway.
Public opinion does seem to be in favor of putting our defenses on a slightly more warlike footing, Neville.
Fortunately, we don't have to pay too much attention to public opinion. I'm instructing the defense services to continue to reduce their estimates.
But you can't. Prime Minister, we are telling the House of Commons that we're increasing our expenditure on arms.
I think that will be all for now.
Swinton didn't seem pleased.
The man virtually accused me of lying to the House on the question of rearmament.
I'd hardly call that lying. Rather a question of getting one's priorities right.
Exactly. Besides, if one always discussed everything in the House first, one wouldn't get anywhere, would one?
Are we supposed to call him Vic, now he's one of the family?
No, I should call him Victor.
But what about Sarah? Will I have to call her Mrs. Oliver from now on?
Now, is that not the only advantage, Mary, of being an actress, that you're able to keep your maiden name?
Money that fellow's earning, I'd be happy to call him anything. £200 a week, law.
Only for 8 weeks, Winston.
And did you know, Papa, that hotels give theatrical people special terms?
Yes. Like commercial travellers, what a life. Poor kitten, hand to mouth, no home, no baby.
It's what she's wanted. You've all always done what you wanted. I dare say you will too when the time comes.
Don't be a journalist, that's all. Politics, if you like. Even the stage, if you must, but never journalism.
Why ever not, Papa? I can think of many worse ways of earning a living. Fleet Street is a marvelous place, Mary.
What's wrong with Papa?
He's been given the sack from the Evening Standard.
But that's awful. Then why did you goad him about journalism when you already knew?
I wasn't goading him, Mary. Why should I live in my father's shadow? I believed in everything I said.
Oh, Randolph, really?
Further, it has been evident that your views on foreign affairs and the part which this country should play are entirely opposed to those held by us. Is this Beaverbrook's doing? It's outrageous.
Well, I should be surprised if it came from the editor alone. Thus, they muzzle my opinion and remove my source of income.
Well, it's not your only source.
Clemmy, I am in debt to the sum of £18,000.
Can't be. What have you done?
My American stocks have collapsed. I owe my brokers £18,000.
Oh, my God, Winston, you've been gambling. How could you? You must have known. What are we going to do?
I don't know. Write more, boil the pot more. It's the only solution. I shall have to abandon politics altogether.
You can't do that. It will kill you. Besides, you'd never pay off the debt that way. We still have our living expenses. There's Mary's school fees and the staff.
Then I shall sell Churchill.
Do you mean that?
Why not? You've never liked it. Now that the children have almost fled the nest, we must look to the future. You can't be left unprovided for. Must be worth 25,000, perhaps 30. That would leave you a goodly sum when I'm dead. Perhaps we could retire somewhere smaller.
When were you thinking of dying, Winston?
What?
Before or after we retire to our little cottage by the sea? Now, I would strongly recommend before, because I could certainly not stand the sight of you wandering mournfully along the sands, dreaming of triumphs that never were.
It is hardly the time for jest.
No, it is not. Nor is it the time for idle fantasies. We are both too old and too wise, or so I should have hoped. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Bracken? Brendan? I need your help.
Is it peace in which we are living? Is it not war without cannons firing? Austria has been struck down and we are all disturbed. But in the coming weeks there may be a seeming calm in which people will say, see how wrong the alarmists were. The Prime Minister will tell us that the tension in Europe is greatly relaxed. But, Mr. Speaker, after a boa constrictor has devoured its prey, does it not have a digestive spell before it is once more hungry? Then will come another stroke. Upon whom? Czechoslovakia, we cannot tell. But we must act now before the evils of Nazi domination stride on towards world mastery. If mortal catastrophe should overtake the British nation and the British Empire, historians 1,000 years hence will be baffled that a victorious nation suffered themselves to be brought so low. Now is the time to rouse ourselves, to unite the whole force and spirit of our people, and to show again that a great British nation standing up before the whole world can, even at this hour, prove the savior of civilization.
Winston.
Thank you. Brendan, you missed my speech.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry. Could I have a word with you?
Now?
Well, it is rather important.
Do forgive me.
Sorry.
You really do have a remarkable sense of timing, Brendan.
But I've talked to a friend, Sir Henry Strakosch. He says he's willing to take over your share account. He says he'll bear full liability. So you don't have to worry about the 18,000.
My dear Brendan.
Superb, Winston. I must congratulate you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
And I've also talked to Camrose on the Telegraph. He'd be delighted to take your articles. I suspect it at a considerably higher fee than you got from the Standard.
But, forgive my churlishness. You really are a friend indeed, Brendan. Well, that's one in the eye for Max Beaverbrook. Perhaps I shall be free to concentrate on things that matter once more.
I thought perhaps a speaking tour.
A speaking tour.
We have seriously underestimated German air production. We must do something. Winston's getting too much support altogether. You know, he's even been to my own constituency.
Perhaps a small increase will be justified. Just enough to give the public confidence that we're not ignoring the problem.
The public may be satisfied with that, but Winston won't be. Nor will Swinton, for that matter. He'll soon have another of his wretched air schemes for me. Oh, I quake every time he appears.
Well, there's very little we can do about Winston, of course, but Swinton, I don't see any problem there. We simply make it impossible for him to function.
Prime Minister, what you're saying still ignores the fact that if we're attacked, we're in no position to defend ourselves.
We aren't going to be attacked. I've told you that before.
Do you know how many modern anti-aircraft guns we have?
I dare say you will tell me.
12. 12 in the whole country, while the Germans have nearly 4,000. We're living in a fool's paradise, Prime Minister, and unless we increase production drastically, we shall have no chance for survival.
This is your firm belief?
It is.
Then I must reluctantly conclude that your thinking is not in accord with the spirit and policies of this government.
Then I have no choice but to resign.
Major von Kleist, my father.
Good morning, Major.
How do you do, Mr. Churchill?
Randolph, would you be kind enough to take notes?
Yes,
Now then, Major, what have you got to tell me?
Do I need to tell you first about myself?
Well, I think I know enough. I know that you are an opponent of the National Socialist Party. That is quite sufficient for me.
Major von Kleist has written a pamphlet attacking the Nazi regime, Papa.
Then you are a brave man, sir. And a lucky one, if I may say so, still to be a serving officer.
Thank you.
Tell me, do all your generals want war with France and Britain? Or is it only Hitler?
Only Hitler.
Then why are divisions being moved towards Czechoslovakia? You understand that if Czechoslovakia is invaded, both France and Britain will not stand idly by.
That is why I've come here. To tell you that Czechoslovakia will be invaded. I tried to tell your Prime Minister, but he did not wish to see me.
Your evidence, Major?
We already have 1.5 million men under arms on the Czech border. They're there for one reason only.
Not peacetime maneuvers, I fancy.
No, they're not. Believe me.
I do. But last time we had reports of peacetime maneuvers, Hitler invaded Austria the next day.
And he will invade Czechoslovakia before the end of September.
If he does, we shall attack him.
Why don't they do something to prevent it? If Britain declared herself against the invasion of Czechoslovakia, if she allied herself with France and Russia to issue a warning, then I believe the German army would do something.
What would they do?
They would refuse to march. They would insist on peace, and Hitler would be overthrown in 48 hours.
Then I shall do my very best to ensure that that happens. Oh.
I really fail to see what we can do. We're dealing with a country a long way away. A country, moreover, that was artificially created after the war. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with Hitler. I can't see that it has anything to do with us.
But surely we have no choice. We've made enough concessions to Hitler. He cannot be allowed to annex the Sudetenland.
But as the Prime Minister said, it is German-speaking territory.
Hitler is merely trying to bully us into submission.
No. No, I find Hitler's anger quite understandable.
Apart from which, we're in far too weak a position to contemplate going to war yet.
Oh, surely Czechoslovakia, at least, should be given the chance to vote on its own future. Could we not insist on that, whatever else?
I doubt if Hitler would agree, Sam.
Good day, Horace.
Good afternoon, Winston.
We must agree to the concessions Hitler demands.
Would you tell the Prime Minister I'm here?
Yes. Excuse me, Prime Minister. Winston is here to see you.
Oh, no. I really can't face Winston at present. Tell him we're busy, Horace. And give him my profuse apologies and arrange another day. You see, gentlemen... What is it?
I really do think that you'd be well advised to see him.
Do you?
Yes.
Very well. Excuse me, gentlemen. Why?
If you agree to his suggestions, you'll find him far less troublesome.
My dear Winston, how very nice to see you. What can I do for you?
According to my information, Prime Minister, Hitler is now ready to invade Czechoslovakia. We must send him an ultimatum. France and Russia are still prepared to come in with us, but if we delay, it'll be too late.
Where do you obtain your information?
Believe me, Prime Minister, it is correct. I hope you'll stand firm and not grant any concessions.
I couldn't be more in agreement with you, Winston. We've just been discussing that very matter. I have no intention of agreeing to any concessions.
Thank you, Morris. A very good run.
Mr. Churchill!
Yeah.
Professor Lindeman's here, sir. In the drawing room.
Thank you, Ingy. Good evening, Prof. Randolph. No drink, that's not like you. Come along. You too, Prof, this time. I'm going to see that you get your 10 cubic centimeters of brandy.
Papa, there's something we have to tell you.
I have something to tell you. We have cause for celebration. I have, at last, received a personal assurance from the Prime Minister himself that this monstrous shilly-shallying is at an end. We are going to make a stand against Germany.
Winston,
You know, I can still hardly believe it. They've finally goaded Neville into action, weak and feeble though he is. The man has at long last seen reason.
The devil he has.
What?
He's tricked you. Chamberlain has tricked you. Good God, how could you fall for it?
What do you mean, Prof? Tell me what's happened.
We've just heard that Chamberlain is planning to fly to Germany to meet Hitler and agree to all his demands over Czechoslovakia.
That can't be true. He told me himself 2 hours ago there would be no concessions.
It is true. And he knew it when he was talking to you.
You know who's at the back of this, don't you? Wilson. Horace Wilson. We no longer have a prime minister. We are governed by a puppet. And a civil servant is pulling the strings. So be it. Chamberlain had the choice between war and shame. He has chosen shame now. He will get war later.